Welcome to the Blatchford Coaching Systems Podcast, where we share over 40 years of wisdom on the business of dentistry. We help maximize efficiency, minimize stress, and give dentists a better life-work balance.
Well, welcome to our podcast. This is Bill Blatchford and our co-CEO and my daughter, Dr. Christina Blatchford, and we are privileged to have with us Perry Marshall. Now, Perry became the Google AdWords guru of the world a few years ago, and of course, he was a pioneer in this area and has written several books, has spoken all over the world on the subject of marketing and sales and Google and the internet and all that sort of thing. And Perry, by training, is an engineer to start with, and is very much involved in sales, which is kind of a oxymoron right there, but Perry was very much interested in the sales arena and moved into this with a lot of success. I first met Perry in a program called Strategic Coach. We shared a table for a couple of years, once a quarter. I was always intrigued by his intellect, his energy, and he just came out with a book. And Christina and I ran across this book. Actually, it was Duke Megan who introduced us to the book, and it's called the 80-20 Principle of Sales and Marketing. So I actually started to enjoy it right from the foreword by Richard Koch, and he talked about the 80-20 principle as a cornerstone for results-based living. And, you know, we've been teaching the 80-20 rule for years to our clients, but never in the depth that you have. Perry, how do you think this would apply to dentistry? I mean, you've worked with some dentists in the past and maybe currently too. So what are some of the ideas how it could work for dentistry?
Well, first, I just want to give a shout out to dentists because I have an electrical engineering degree, and I have found that dentists are kind of an artistic version of engineers. You know, you're giving somebody a better smile, and that is definitely an art. But, you know, dentists are methodical, they're results-driven, they're process-oriented, they understand flow charts, and they understand cause and effect and all of that. And the first thing that I want to say to dentists about cause and effect is 80-20 is the master formula for cause and effect. And I had a giant epiphany when I first read Richard Koch's book called The 80-20 Principle, and I suddenly realized that instead of 80-20 being this one little square on a big giant sheet of business, it was more like everything in business went inside the 80-20 square. Okay, it really has just flipped everything upside down. Hey, wait a minute. 80-20 is everywhere. It's not just this thing that people in business talk about sometimes or people in economics. I mean, I think most people have heard that 20% of the people make 80% of the money or own 80% of the real estate, or 20% of the patients generate 80% of the revenue. I think a lot of people know that. But what they don't realize is that it's absolutely everywhere that 20% of the teeth in people's mouths get 80% of the cavities, and 20% of the office hours are when 80% of the phone calls come in, or that 20% of the dentist chairs have 80% of the patients, or that 20% of the bad customer experiences or the nightmare customer experiences come from 80% of the problem customers. And so it really is everywhere. And it's like when you put on 80-20 glasses, you start to see that there are some things that you become hyper-focused on eliminating a very small number of problems. Mm-hmm. You get hyper-focused on expanding a very small number of opportunities, and there's a whole lot of other things that you can either ignore or delete. And it's very contrarian because people are trained to think anti-80-20 in school and in most things that we do. So 80-20 is always counterintuitive.
You know, I think that this book is just really, it's amazing that it applies to just about everything in your life. Just like you were saying, how these different concepts apply to the dental office. And today we're talking about sales and marketing. What I find amazing, that really rang true to me when I was reading this book, is that we tend to spend a great amount of time chasing what we would call the bottom 20% of our patients, or if we're generally in sales outside of the dental office, we spend so much time really working on those people or prospects that are not really even in our realm at all. So I think that's a really interesting concept. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so there's this very natural tendency for the squeaky wheels to get the grease. And as a marketer, I can tell you that many, many times squeaky wheels are not profitable customers.
Okay.
Our brain and our training and our conditioning wants us to rush over and help them and solve their problem and prove that we're good enough and all of that. But in actuality, a lot of times, the ones that they're the most demanding and they're asked for the most things, they're really just not profitable customers. Whereas on the other hand, the most profitable customers are easy to ignore because they are so low maintenance. They come in, they get their teeth cleaned, they disappear, and it's easy to not even realize that there's a whole nother set of opportunities with them, that if it was that easy to get them in once, it might be easy to get them in for something else. And my friend Len Bertain has this thing, he calls it the 20-1-20 rule. And here's what it is. 20% of what you sell generates 120% of your profits. And then the opposite end of the spectrum, this other 20% eats up 20% of your profits and pulls you down to 100%. This is true of product lines and services that you offer. It's also true of specific patients and clients, and it's true in most businesses, and it's just as true in dental offices as it is in anywhere else.
Yeah, we have often said that we divide it up into the top 20%, comprise 80%, and then the middle 60% gives us 30 more percent, which takes 110. So Lynn's idea is exactly where we are. We see at that bottom 20%. And Christina just mentioned that we spend a lot of time chasing that bottom 20% of patients who are not profitable anyway. And so we do have our clients go through that, and I think this will just reinforce that. One of the things that you mentioned also in your forward is that your best new customers are your existing customers. You want to talk about that a little bit? And I call that the new patient myth.
Well, yes. Existing customers are probably 3 to 5 times easier, less resistant to being sold. And whereas new customer acquisition in almost any business is a negative profit proposition. I mean, almost by definition, most businesses will acquire a new customer at a net loss, and they only make money on the second or third transaction. Now, I think humans are wired to pay attention to just getting those new customers. It's kind of sexy, it's kind of exciting, it's a challenge. It feeds your ego, and I also think that we are inherently driven to build our business for external appearances or for numbers or for simple explanations where maybe you're just like looking for a top line number or a number of patients or a number of dentist chairs or number of doctors and something or whatever it may be, and you're not actually optimizing for profit. And so like if you, let's say that your revenue goal is $200,000 a month in your dentist office, it's probably the case that the last $50,000, getting that from 150 up to 200 consumes 3/4 of everybody's time, and the first 150 actually only takes 1/4. Okay, well, so what are you actually trying to optimize? And if you're just trying to maximize revenue, then I guess that's what you do. But maybe if you said, well, let's actually try to be more efficient. I know one guy, he told me about how he was getting, I don't know if it was dental offices or chiropractor offices or what, but they'd actually reduced the hours of the practice and reduced the windows, and most of the people were working part-time, and they were seeing almost as many patients, but the overhead was less, the staff was less. Now, Bill, I don't have any idea if it all fits in, the broader thing of what you're teaching, but I'm just making the point that there are usually these very nicely running parts of our businesses that we almost don't pay attention because we don't have to. And then, hey, wait a minute. What if you expanded that?
Exactly. You couldn't have gone into ours better, because that's one of the biggest things we teach is that, we get these practices that are, I will call them top-line practices, very large, new patient flow. There's an incredible number of new patient flows. Gross is great, and profit is low. And, of course, one of the things that we do, and I just got off a 4-hour conference call this morning with a number of clients, and, we always ask them to talk about what's going well. And of course, it's summer, and so most of them are just getting back from a 2-week vacation where they used to take a week off a couple times a year. Now they're taking off, much more time, and the efficiency is part of it, and part of that is lower overhead, smaller staffs, and which is the largest part of their overhead, and that fits in perfectly. And that's what do you do that makes money? And eliminate that part that's not. And Christina mentioned the same thing earlier when she said that we spend so much energy trying to get that bottom 20% in. And again, you said the word counterintuitive. And, very often I look at practices and I say they're over-hygiened. And that is because they have more hygiene capacity than demand. And so they spend all their energy trying to get that last 20% in, where there really isn't any profit in that anyway. So, no, you couldn't have, without even knowing exactly what I teach, you couldn't have done it better.
It was a pretty perfect explanation. So, and going back to the statement that is said in the foreword of the book about your best new customers are your existing customers, just like my dad said, the 80/20 sales and marketing book really then ties in well with our Blatchford solution system, in that we really take this opportunity to focus on your existing patients who are coming into your office and finding out what they truly want, instead of, just like you're saying, Perry, is kind of ignoring them because they're not the squeaky wheel in our practice, but in fact they are really these patients that are coming in that are our loyal customers that we want to really focus on.
Yeah, it's the same thing we do in our dental practice. We have this list of, or in our teaching, we have a list of what we call Blatchford's power questions. And what we're trying to do there, of course, is eliminate the prospects and patients who don't have the means or the money for our dental services. And so we ask, I have to talk about a budget for this treatment, and we start that question on the telephone, and so we eliminate trying to sell to that group of people.
And that when we're talking about sales, we really are talking about treatment that we would only do for our family members. And so when Perry talks about upselling or downselling and that type of thing, we're really working on uncovering our patients' wants, and it's an absolute no pressure situation for our patients. But certainly we would never present any treatment, any dentistry that we wouldn't offer to our own family members.
Yeah, good point.
Well, and I completely agree. And the whole point of 80/20 is that, there's this ineffective 20% that like people try to jam stuff down their throats, and they're like, man, we need every last bit of revenue here, and like they're generating ill will and all this. And on the other hand, there are all these other people, they would actually happily and easily and effortlessly write you more checks for even better teeth, but they're getting ignored because somebody's focusing on the wrong part of the business.
So true.
Absolutely. Yeah, I was talking to my good friend and client Rise 4 this morning here in Seattle, and he was spending the morning doing a prepping virtually and for those of our clients, you can look at his case on Dental IQ. It's literally a full mouth rehab of 32 teeth, not 28, but 32. Under sedation. That is in the 20% of the 20% of the 20% to do a case like that. And that's what Rise has done for the last number of years, is he has. And this patient was there because no one had even suggested this kind of treatment. And so Rise has done this for years. It's focusing on these people who are in that 20% of the 20%. So good point. Both of you are right on this stuff. You've got to figure out who that 20% of these people are that could become your great patients, and you can identify them. I mean, there are people that you're absolutely going to waste your time on, and there are people in your practice you're going to lose on. And if you can identify those before you do it by asking the right questions, it really makes a lot of sense.
Who opened the email? Who called? Who set an appointment? Who showed up for the appointment? And every one of those events eliminates some people and selects other people. And most people, most marketers, most business owners are afraid of that moment of truth when you're going to find out, are they in or are they out? And what the contrarian 80-20 marketer does is goes, no, I'm going to find out as soon as possible which ones I'm not playing with, which ones I am playing with, who's in, who's out. Let's find out right now, and let's get on with this thing.
Stina, you had some questions about
I think that we probably have a lot of dentists who are listening who would love to hear from Perry about how to use the 80-20 concept to invest in the right 20% of marketing. So what we tend to find out, and first of all, we really recommend that all of our doctors, and we encourage all of our doctors to keep track of all the marketing that they're spending and find out really what the ROI is on that. And in the book, on I think it was page 21, Perry writes that the vast majority of businesses waste huge sums of money on ineffective advertising. And even further, you mentioned someone who, when it was broke down, was wasting about 80% of their money on marketing that wasn't bringing in anything. So what tools would you suggest a dentist bring in to use the 80-20 concept to really get the right 20% into their practice?
The starting point is tracking results and conversions. So, for example, in Google AdWords, which is, by the way, when it's done correctly, is a very effective tool for dentists. I know this. You have to track conversions of clicks to phone calls and clicks to, fill in the request form or whatever it is that you have on the website for people to raise their hand. And that is literally the first thing you do in Google AdWords. It's the first thing we check on our checklist is, do you have conversion tracking in place? What do I mean by that? So Google has a tool built in where either phone calls to your office or people filling out a form that a little pixel is in a thank you page, and it will go back to Google and it'll say this person made it all the way not only to your website but to the thank you page after they filled out the little form. Therefore, your cost per lead was whatever the number is, like $40 or something like that. Or your cost per phone call was $25. And if you do any other kind of advertising like print or or newspaper or billboard, you need to have a tracking phone number in place. You know exactly how many phone calls you got. Now, if you're sophisticated, you'll even eventually connect that to how much money they spent. Now that's a little bit more of an advanced piece, and probably not all the people listening are going to have progressed that far. But you will find in every case, as you start tracking these things, you will find huge differences, just huge. So you'll find some sources, they bring you a patient, or at least get you a phone call for maybe $5, and other ones cost $500. And the differential between the effective advertising and the ineffective advertising is literally 100 to 1. Now, what most people don't know, and what 80/20 really shows you, is that almost everything is on a huge spectrum of how effective it is. It's not like, well, these things are 20% or 25% more effective. It's like these things are 10 times more effective or less. These things are 100 times more effective or less effective. And so there are levers in your business and in your advertising where a little bit of it is just generating these huge returns, and then all the rest of it isn't, and you don't know. You're completely oblivious until you track.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There was a phone call just last week, Perry. You nailed it right there. One of our clients is tremendously successful and has very large practice, and somewhat of a marketing guru. He tracks every single thing he does in the marketing area. It's a discrete phone number for everything. And of course, the reception answering the phone is identified which media they're coming in from. He also knows exactly what that new patient is worth to him over the next 60 days. And he can actually make some very informed decision. Whereas what I find is that so many of the doctors out there are throwing money. As Christina said, they're just throwing money out there and hope it sticks. But if you don't study it, track it, test it. I know one of the things that you talked about in your book was the pay-per-click and then split testing. Could you talk to us a little about the split testing?
Yes, so I started using Google AdWords shortly after it came out, and let me tell you, the moment I fell in love with Google AdWords, so I had been using it for maybe a couple of days. It's like, wow, this is really interesting. I can bid on any word in the English language, and then I can make an ad show up, and then I pay when they click, and that's really cool. Well, the thing that made me fall in love with it was, so I wrote an ad, and I was sitting there looking at it, and I noticed that the create an ad button was still there. And I thought, if I click on that button again, is it going to do what I think it's going to do? And I clicked on the button, and I wrote a different ad, and I saved it. And now I had two, and I said, is this going to do what I think it is? And I go to Google, and I refresh the search, and it went back and forth from one ad to the other. And I thought, I'll be darned. They have A/B split testing built into this thing from the word go. I love this. And I had already known the value of A/B split testing, and I had already done it. But it was hard. Like you had to send out two fax blasts, one with one fax number, one with the other fax number, and then you could see, how many people responded to the first message versus the second one. You could do this, but it was laborious. Google made it really easy.
Automated it.
And so, yeah, they totally automated it. And actually, you could have 3 ads, 4 ads, 5 ads. And so I started testing ads. Now, if you've never done this before, you have no idea how incredibly sensitive human beings are to whether something gets said the right way or the wrong way. And you don't know what the right or the wrong way is until you actually try it. And so, so you put a few ads out there. One of them gets a 0.8%. Another one gets a 2.8%. Another one gets a 5.7%. Another one gets a 7.3%. Well, if you got one ad with a 7.3%, you got another ad with a 0.8%, the good ad is 9 times better than the bad one. And it affects you profitability 9x as well. So the one with the higher click-through rate will literally get 9 times more traffic for the same amount of money as the inferior one. And so you are now in a process of Kaizen, continuous improvement. All right, so every 2 weeks or every month or every 3 days or however often I can do it, I'm going to put another ad out there. I'm going to say something different yet again, and I'm looking for the better message that's going to get more people clicking on my ad. And Google will directly reward you for that relevance.
You know, one of the things that I see is this, and this, to me this is fascinating, is that doctors will put an ad out and they'll stick with it for years and never test it to see if it's working against something else. And what this allows us to do is change the ad, change the website, change whatever it is we're putting out there on the website, or the Google AdWords, or whatever it is we put out there. And you can constantly be changing these things. And in case, listeners, if you don't get this, this is your competitor. And I'm not talking about other dentists. I'm talking about everybody else out there in the retail field selling things to your patients, and they are doing this constantly. And that is why they are selling so much to your patients, because they're testing and they find out what works, and they are getting that money, that discretionary money that we're not getting because we're not doing this. And so this is something, when you read Perry's book, go back and study this part of the book on split testing and take a look at whatever you're throwing out there to the public and study this. You know, this kind of reminds me a little bit, and the thing that you just mentioned is it's not just that little increase, it's actually the square of that. And
yes,
you don't know this.
Yeah.
You can just think it improves 4 times, but actually it's 16 times. And if you're missing out 96% of the opportunities, it's just amazing. Perry, you talk about fractal math. Tell us a little bit more about fractals. I thought that I've looked at fractals and other applications before, but I thought that was an interesting.
I think dentists can appreciate this. I would think that maybe a lot of people listening have seen pictures of fractals where they see the colorful patterns, and then there's a pattern within a pattern and a pattern within a pattern. And, if you type fractals into Google and look at the images, you'll find all these beautiful computer-generated patterns. And I became really fascinated with that a long time ago. And the big epiphany when I read just a little comment that Richard Koch made in his book, he didn't even really develop it, but he just made this offhand comment that 80-20 is closely related to fractals and chaos theory. Now, I don't exactly this way to most people, but dentists being a more technical audience, I think you guys can really appreciate what I'm saying. And so there's this whole branch of science called chaos theory, and it's concerned with things like an avalanche on the side of a mountain. If you hit it at the right time, you could clap your hands and cause 100 tons of snow to go barreling down that cliff. Okay, or the butterfly effect, which says that a butterfly's wings 6 months from now could create a hurricane on the other side of the world. And 80-20 is fractal. And what fractal means is there's a pattern inside a pattern inside a pattern inside a pattern. Mm-hmm. And so with 80-20, there's an 80-20 inside every 80-20. So Pareto, 100 years ago, discovered, as an Italian economist, he discovered that 20% of the people have 80% of the money. Well, guess what? 20% of the 20% have 80% of the 80%. And 20% of the 20% of the 20% have 80 of the 80 of the 80. And it keeps going and keeps going. So, for example, when you're 3 80-20s deep, what you find is that 1% of the people have 50% of the money. And then you can keep going. Well, this is a law of nature. You actually can't change it. All you can do is change which group you belong to. You can't change it for everybody. Politicians make a living telling people that they're going to abolish 80-20, and they're never going to do it, okay? So that means there's incredibly powerful levers in very small parts of your business. So 80-20 is true of the entire population of the world, that in all 250 countries, 20% of the people make 80% of the money, and 20% of the countries have 80% of the GDP, and it's just absolutely true. It's also true when you get all the way down to the Forbes 400, the Fortune 500. It's still true when you get down to the top 10 people in the Forbes 400. You could just look at them, and it's still 80-20. Now, actually, in that case, it's more like 70-30, close enough. So whether you're dealing with the 10 richest people in America or if you're dealing with the whole entire world, 80-20 is true over and over and over again. And so what my book really is not only is 80-20 the master rule of all cause and effect, on top of that, there's an 80-20 inside every 80-20. So there's levers inside of levers inside of levers. And in fact, this is the most effective way to approach any problem in marketing, whether you're writing copy, split testing ads, hiring people, servicing customers, upselling customers, downselling customers. It's all 80-20.
It's fascinating when I saw the list. I've kind of thought that before about the Forbes 100 or 400 list. You put the Waltons at the top of the list with $87 billion. Wow, you just skewed the numbers right there. And Bill Gates number 2 with $57 billion. It skews that. One of the things I want to do is for the doctors listening to this call, I want to inoculate something here. Perry is used to retail. Perry is used to, selling things. When he says customer, I want all of you to say patient. I've got a few of you saying, yeah, but this makes sense, but it doesn't apply to me. Doctors listening to this does apply to you. You see, it's the same thing that we talk about when we talk about right brain marketing and right brain ads. We've had several clients use an ad, very simple, like pension denture sufferers. Free report reveals how to stop being a victim to your dentures once and for all. And this is a very effective ad. And I just spent a few days on our boat last week with one of our doctors who actually does a testimonial for us, Dr. Richard Dunn, Elmira, New York, and he still uses that ad, and it produces for him. But that ad didn't just happen. You see, that was tested and tested and tested, so he's narrowed down. You see, you think about 80-20. It's not just everybody that might see it. It's now the 20% of the people that wear dentures, but it narrows down even further to the 20% of the 20% who are denture sufferers. So not advertising to the people that are satisfied with their situation. You're now just down to the 20% of the 20%, and you see those become very much a potential patient in his office. And so that is something that to think about. You mentioned 7 cardinal rules. One of them is... 2 of them. One is before you try to sell anything, you must know how much you're willing to pay to get a new patient. You touched on this just a little bit, but talk a little bit more about that. Which, your average patient value, that sort of thing, and then how much are you willing to pay to acquire a new patient? I think that's one of the things dentists, they look at Google AdWords, which they pay for, and they go, I don't want to spend money. And let's talk about that.
Whenever I talk to somebody in any kind of consulting role, I almost always ask them this question. If I had a magic gumball machine and you put money in the gumball machine, you turn the crank and out comes a new patient, how much would you put in the gumball machine to make that happen? What's the most you'd put in and still be happy? What's your comfort level? And interestingly, most people have to think about that for a few minutes before they can give me an answer. The answer is not on the tip of their tongue. And it should be, because that's the cardinal question of advertising is your advertising getting you a new patient at an acceptable price? Well, you need to know that. And then once you have that number, and Bill, what would you say for the typical person that's in your tribe? What do you think that number is?
That's one of the things that is a good question. And one of the, just like the other day, I was talking to one doctor, and he said in the first 60 days, his new patient flow, he has about 150 new patients a month. They average $2,100. And I always tell doctors not to compare it to someone else, because everybody is different. If I were then to go to a client that I talked to earlier this morning who does nothing but full mouth reconstruction, implant supported, his typical new client is worth somewhere around $25,000. So you see it differs, but they need to know that. Whatever that number is, they need to know it. And if you look in the car business, for example, I recently received a beautiful box in the mail in FedEx, and it was the hood ornament for a Mercedes.
That's clever.
And personally, I'm not a car guy. I'm a Ford F-150 pickup driver, but I thought it was very clever. Now, obviously, they are willing to spend more for a new customer of a Mercedes because they've got a high-end product, and so they know that they can afford to spend that. Now, my suspicion is they didn't just send that out to everybody in my zip code. There were probably some triggers based on income, which is, they can find public information. They can look on the internet. I mean, the cost of data today is so inexpensive. They can find what I do spend money on. They can probably find out how much I spend on various things. And I'm even suspicious that they probably know how much my income is. They probably know what my bank account is. They probably know everything. And so they can make these decisions and send out this hood ornament to the right people. And I'm suggesting that we need to be smart the same way.
That's exactly right. And so everybody's got a different business model. Everybody's got a different economic model. But if you know, all right, so my patient value in the first 2 months is $2,000, and I'm willing to spend $1,500 of that to get them in the door. Well, now the definition of what your advertising is supposed to do is suddenly very clear and very simple. And now you can, it's like, well, I gave you $1,500, I got nothing. I gave you $1,500, I got 3 patients. Gave this other guy $1,500, I got 5 patients. And now you can quickly sort all this out and start testing stuff and optimizing it, and then just maximizing your results. And that's your job as a marketer.
Absolutely. I just a couple other things. I know, Christina, you've got some things you want to bring up too. I know one of the things that you want to talk about was the personal assistant that Sari talked about.
Yeah, I really, so all of these different concepts in this book made so much sense to me. And one of the biggest ones was in chapter 18 was how to get more 1,000-hour work done with a personal assistant. And I thought that was a really interesting chapter, especially to me as a mom and a dental practice owner, and also the co-CEO of Blatchford Solutions, and that the time that you spend farming out the different things that you do during your day that don't keep you in your unique ability are invaluable. So that just goes so much further. So I thought that concept was really interesting, that if you make over $30 an hour, you can afford a personal assistant. Can you talk just a little bit about that?
Oh, yes. So 80/20 says that everything is exponential. The value of things is not $10 versus $15 an hour versus $20 an hour. The value of work is actually $10 an hour versus $100 versus $1,000 versus $10,000, and that even a person running a small dental practice, maybe it's a single dentist, regularly does $1,000 an hour work. Sure. But he or she is also surrounded by all kinds of little $10 an hour tasks that need to be done. And I can tell you this, if you took away all my employees and staff and everything, and you stripped it down, the last person I would give up would be my personal assistant. Mm-hmm. Her job is to do, and it could be a guy, like it doesn't matter, but her job is to do the 80% of the things that need to be done that are only worth 20% as much money.
Perfect.
And there's lots of those things. And in fact, my personal assistant started out at the very beginning, putting gas in my car, taking my car to the shop, changing furnace filters, like doing these little errands and things, going to the office supply store. And gradually I started giving her more and more and more business stuff. Now, what a lot of people do in order to save time and money, they outsource things that are difficult to outsource, like marketing and advertising and talking to the patients and stuff like that. Whereas actually there's a whole bunch, it's like if you could just suddenly put on your 80/20 glasses and see there's a bunch of $10 an hour stuff, there's a fair amount of $100 an hour stuff, and there's a minority of $1,000 an hour stuff, and there's occasionally $10,000 an hour work that you do, and your job is to be always in the top. And that pretty much means that every day you start your day by going, what am I getting rid of? And two things about this. I think most people have an egalitarian sense of the world that kind of pushes against that, like, oh, I don't know, I should be equal. No, your job is to be unequal. You went to school, then you went to dental school, you're a doctor, you got all this stuff. You are not equal. Your time is not worth what everybody else's is, and there's lots of people that would love that job. It's actually a perfectly fine job. It's not a dreary job. Helping you out, there's plenty of people that can do that. And then also, I think you have to acknowledge that there are boundary issues with people. Like several years ago, I read this newspaper article, and there was this court case, and a guy had let go. It was a dentist, by the way. He had let go of one of his employees because she was too beautiful. And
oh, I remember that.
One of my friends was like, what? And I said, hey, now we all know that you can only get a job at Hooters if you look a certain way. Everybody knows that. I said, can we just acknowledge that this gorgeous chick was kind of being a problem for this guy and he had to make the problem go away? Like, do you get that? And the guy's like, yeah, I guess you're right. I said, when I had all this resistance to having a personal assistant because I was nervous about having somebody in my personal space. Well, you need to find somebody where it's not an issue. My PA, she's got great boundaries. She's not like, all interested in, like nurturing my inner child or whatever, but I really just want to bring that up because I think a lot of people could be a lot more effective if they had somebody at their side where you can just go, do this, here, right. Take care of this, book this appointment, call that person, call this vendor. It frees you up so much. It's unbelievable. I can't believe I lived for years without it.
Right. Well, I think that's great. And, I host a monthly call for our Blatchford clients called the Athena Call, and it's for our female practitioners. And one of the things that we talk about is balance and really trying to find that balance between work and home life and having everything. And we hear the myth, that you can have it all. And we sometimes get that confused with you have to do it all to have it all. And
you know what? That is a myth. You can't have it all. There's no way you can have it all. You'll kill yourself having it all.
Right.
You know what you can have? Right. You can have the 20% that you really care about.
Right. Exactly.
Wonderful analogy. And this is one of the things that we do with our clients, Perry, is we have them do a task analysis, we call it, and they list everything that they do, and then why do they do it? And I say to the doctors, there's only two reasons I want you doing any of these tasks. One, it requires a state dental license, and those are very difficult to get, and you've worked hard to get there, so if it requires a license, I want you doing it. And the only other reason is it adds value to your life. If it does not add value to your life, find someone else to do it for you. In other words, if it's one of those tasks that I have to do this. Well, no, you don't. If it doesn't require a license, you don't have to do it. Find someone else. Now, we all have things that we enjoy doing, and I have certain things that I enjoy. And, one of the things that my wife and I enjoy doing together, for example, is we have a boat that has a tremendous amount of varnish work on it. I mean, just bright work. And we both just really enjoy. And I've hired it done from time to time. But the truth is, I enjoy doing it. I enjoy the meticulous attention to detail. It's just a challenge for us. And we've done it for 20 years. And sometimes we say, why do we do that? Because what we get paid to do it per hour is so low you wouldn't even believe it. But we enjoy it, so it qualifies. But there are other tasks that we just don't do anymore, and it really makes a huge difference. I want to thank you for this time, and I can really just enjoy spending some time with you. And I do want to say that I miss not seeing you at Coach anymore. But I just want to say that spending time with you, it's no wonder your book is so interesting. And if you could mention again how our clients would get a hold of your book.
You can go to sell8020.com and you can buy it from our website, and we'll ship it to you, and your 80/20 adventure will begin. You will never see the world the same way after you read this book. You'll literally look out the window and see, like, I'm looking at a tree outside my window, and guess what? 20% of the branches carry 80% of the sap. Okay, and it's
wild.
It's true everywhere. It is all around you, and once you see it, you'll never unsee it, and you'll suddenly be able to make all kinds of positive changes in your dental practice.
And I'm looking out the window of a hotel in Seattle, and I can tell you that 80% of the cars are sitting still and 20% are moving.
That's right.
Very good. Well, thank you both, and this book was fantastic, and we highly recommend it. Thank you.
Well, thank you both. Thank you for your thoughtful questions, and Bill, it was a pleasure to spend some time with you today.
If you like what you heard on today's show and are curious about how our systems can be customized for your practice, schedule a call to speak with one of our doctor coaches. Simply go to blatchford.com/call. No pressure, no BS, just an honest conversation to see if we can help you. Over the years, more than 4,000 dentists made this same call and discovered how Blatchford coaching transformed their profitability, their practice, and their lives. Go to blatchford.com/call. Thanks for listening.